Our teams are back, of course, talking FF7, we're talking Rebirth. We have a lot to go over today. We're just going to look at a bunch of pieces of information coming from Shinra Archaeology department, just translations and shit over the last several days. We have like a little bit of updates on like part 3, like kind of where they're at on that game. We have stuff about like the post game of Rebirth, the chapter select, a really interesting feature they're adding. And then we have just like some dating mechanic stuff for like the gold saucer date and stuff like that. And then just a bunch of other random shit we got to talk about. So we'll hop right into it. FF7 Rebirth creative director Nomura says he does see fan speculation. He thinks it's very insightful and interesting. Some theorizing comes close to what the team has envisioned, while some offers interesting alternatives they have never considered. He can't say which is which. They further say, Nomura adds that out of all the staff, he's probably the one who pays the most attention to fan speculation. Sometimes he'll even ask Toriyama if they're properly accounting for certain things players have analyzed. So it's obviously pretty cool to hear. Like, we've been aware of them in the past, like keeping tabs on like the community, kind of what their thoughts and opinions are on shit, the reactions and stuff. But also that they keep tabs, specifically Nomura, is like keeping tabs on like fan theories, and that apparently some of the theories out there are pretty close to what they've envisioned, and some of it's stuff that they've never even kind of considered. Makes you wonder what they are. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and like try to talk about that and speculate on which theories are correct. We're very close to the release of the game, but it's just kind of cool to hear. Rebirth director Hamaguchi says there's one scene in particular that he thinks will resonate very strongly with fans. It's not a scene from the original, but a brand new scene that has been added to the story of Rebirth. This scene takes place in the village of Gungaga. The circumstances and the involvement of one of the characters cause them to question themselves and to think seriously about what they're doing and where things are going. There's also a lot of resonance and connection to things that happen later in the story. So based on like that second part and like Shinra Archaeology department using the picture of Cloud, it does seem to be about Cloud, which we kind of already got that spoiled for us with the final trailer, because we've already seen him like blood on his face, about to attack Tifa, thinking that Tifa's maybe Genova, and like quoting Sephiroth from like one of the other previous trailers or whatever about her like taking the shape of people you love or whatever. So it's kind of ruined by the final trailer. Like, it kind of sucks that that's what that is. It's still going to be probably an interesting scene, but I was hoping more for Zack stuff. It's fucking Gungaga. It's his goddamn hometown. Regardless, there better be some Zack stuff here. We better get some, I don't know what, this could be a place or a location where like Cloud learns the truth or kind of starts to remember Zack maybe in the story, because obviously his parents are here. We're on Cisne here, who knows Zack as well. And if we have what we had in the original FF7, like you can meet Zack's parents, and that's when like Aerith kind of reminisces on who Zack was a bit. And the way they handled it in Remake, like Cloud can't even like hear Zack's name without like freaking out, getting like a headache, right? So this could be like a kind of a breaking moment for Cloud. Maybe where he starts spiraling potentially, I don't know. You know that I say that, man, it could be related to like the Cloud freaking out that we've seen in the trailer. We know that's taking place in Gungaga. Maybe this is where he starts to question everything, right? Like if he starts to remember who Zack is, or like faintly remembers who Zack is or something, and he starts questioning like Tifa's existence and his own existence and who the fuck is Zack, and it could all be like one thing that's kind of culminating in Gungaga. That could be pretty interesting. This one's not necessarily new information, but I think it's important to read. While Final Fantasy VII Remake served as a foundation for this group to fight against fate, you left the Nibelheim scenes largely unchanged. Was this because you have such a strong connection to the scenes? So in terms of the Nibelheim flashback being largely unchanged, we do believe that this location is very central and a core to the story. However, there's also a fantasy element to it where Sephiroth falls from grace and the story begins. So it's very much a place of origin for the title, following Cloud's telling of the story, which is mixed with Zack's memories, very goddamn important. So in that sense, he has these sort of mannerisms that are very similar to Zack, as some players may notice. And that's another aspect which was, of course, a subversion of the already intended original title, which is the journey that the original creators took us on, but now we're able to represent that in a fully realized form. So pretty much all of that for the majority of us is not new information. But the thing is, the Zack memories part is something that I just wanted to put out there, because there's people that argue against that. We've talked about that in videos. If you talk about this on like social media, there's every now and then people will try to argue that like Cloud doesn't have a mixture of like Zack's memories. And it's like, this is the fucking director of the game telling you that. We've been knowing this for a long time. They even fucking say in the original FF7. And generally these people are people that don't really play the games. But regardless, we've been knowing this for a long time, and now you have it, the director for fucking Rebirth telling you that Cloud has Zack's memories. Boom, we can move on past that goddamn discussion now. Rebirth producer Yoshinori Kadase says that after spending nearly 30 years with Final Fantasy VII's characters, he wants to make them happy and give them a happy ending. However, he says the rest of the team is also taken into consideration, so it won't just be happiness and rainbows. I thought that quote was kind of interesting, because we've actually talked about the concept of them giving like happy endings to characters from the original game, like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, for example. We know that Biggs is alive, potentially, I guess. I mean, it could be live stream world, whatever the fuck, who cares? Wedge is probably alive just because we didn't see him die on camera, and the potential of like Jesse being alive or whatever the fuck. And like that's kind of interesting, because they died really early in the original FF7 and didn't really have that much of an impact on the story overall, if you think about it. I can't remember how often like our characters might mention them post Midgar, right, in the original FF7. So it'd be kind of interesting to give them more, but also give them like a happy ending where they don't have to die. Something with like Dyne, like if Dyne doesn't die this time around, doesn't kill himself, or maybe just walks off into the distance and never got to hear from him again, but he doesn't have to fucking die. Like, that's an interesting concept that I'm kind of okay with. So it's kind of cool that, Kitase has been with this franchise for nearly 30 years, and he wants to, like, give the characters a happy ending. I'm confused a bit if we're just following the trajectory of FF7, because there's still more dark times to come, right? If we're leading up to Advent Children, Dirge to Cerberus, and all this other shit, right? I'm not trying to, like, argue or whatever, or make this all about theory crafting bullshit, but it's like, we can't realistically give the characters for FF7 a happy ending with the remake project unless this is a new thing, a new part of the compilation, some sort of continuation of the story, whatever, right? Because we know where it's all going. And it doesn't end at the end of FF7. There's more to come. As to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will clarify overarching mysteries about the world, such as parallel timelines, creative director Nomura says he thinks it will to some extent, or at least in a general sense. However, he wants to maintain interest in where things are going even beyond Rebirth. So I've already seen people take that, like, answer and run with it as in, like, proof of there being parallel timelines. And even though that I'm somebody that believes that there potentially could be, or at least two different worlds, whatever, that could be live stream world and regular world, whatever. There's definitely, like, two, like, existences at the very least, right? Whatever you want to phrase that term. This isn't like Nomura confirming there's, like, parallel timelines, dude. Because they just ask if Rebirth is going to answer the mysteries of the world, such as parallel timelines. And he says that he thinks it will to an extent, or in a general sense, right? He's not saying, yes, it's going to prove there's multiple timelines. It's one of those things that's kind of interesting, I guess, about this community. Like, anytime, like, a translation comes out or something like this, or an answer from a Q&A or an interview or whatever, that even remotely sort of validates, like, a theory they've maybe been talking about. They just can't wait to, like, get their Twitter fingers ready. Like, to quote tweet, be like, I was fucking right the whole time. Like, it's... Like, the amount of validation people get out of, like, this theory crafting shit when it comes to the remake project is so asinine to me. I don't know. Like, it's fun to talk about, and I do enjoy, like, deep diving on theories, and that shit is fun for me sometimes. But, like, the amount of, like, importance it brings to people is crazy to me. Like, they just want to be right all the time. It's so strange. Like, Rebirth director Hamaguchi says that after unlocking chapter selection, players can replay chapters without Cloud in their team, allowing them to control other characters as the lead party member. So obviously this was an exciting, like, piece of info. A lot of people were excited about this. I had multiple people, like, hit me up either on social media or in the comments of videos to let me know about this, like, for this little piece of info. I think it's great, obviously. It's pretty cool that that's a thing that they're allowing. I just don't know why we have to beat the game for that. Why do we have to finish the entire game to unlock this? If you already have this available, why can't we just do it? Because there's RPGs that go back as far as, like, at the very least, like, that I can think of off the top of the head. It's like PS2, the Dragon Quest VIII, a game I talk about off and on here on the channel. One of my favorite games of all time. One of my favorite RPGs of all time. You're obviously the hero, the main character is, like, who you are supposed to be, but, like, you can switch and make anybody the party leader and run around the world as anybody at any point in time, and that's on PlayStation 2. And they have this available in Rebirth, but you have to finish the game for it to be a thing. That's just, why can't we just do it anytime we want to? I'm assuming it's similar to, like, the outfit thing, where you can't, like, use the wacky outfits until, like, a later, like, certain points of the game, or what seems to be, like, a new game plus or whatever, the chapter select stuff that seems like you might be able to fuck with, like, the outfits and wear those whenever. So they maybe want you to be, like, controlling Cloud throughout the first playthrough to try to get, like, the intended perspective of the story or whatever. But, like, I can run around the world as Tifa, and then when we go into, like, a cutscene, you could put me on Cloud. Like, I'm controlling Cloud in that moment, and we're getting the exposition we're supposed to get. Like, running around the world as a particular character wouldn't necessarily fuck up the flow of the story, right? I think it'd been cool if we could have, all in our first playthrough of Rebirth, got to kind of run around with who our favorite characters are. Now we're going to hop into some of the affection system / dating mechanic shit. Rebirth director Hamaguchi says the team made affection values visible this time to give players a sense of security about which characters they were building affection with. The value can increase with dialogue and event choices, combat, clearing quests, and minigames. And, like, them showing off, like, the affections for the characters is something we have already seen from the state of play. Like, I actually showed this off when they were talking about, like, the dating mechanics and shit towards, like, the end of the presentation, I believe. Which is pretty nice because of the original game, like, each character has their own starting value, at least the ones that you can go on a date with. And unless you're, like, following a guide or keeping track yourself, and even then, you're not going to know unless you're following a guide. You're not going to know how many points are being lost or gained, really. Like, you're not going to know. So it's nice that there's, like, the smiley face circles above characters' heads that can show you, like, how much affection you have for this character or that character. And speaking of the affection system, we have this. Rebirth director Hamaguchi says that it is possible to max out affection with multiple characters. If this happens, there are rules that determine which character takes priority for the date event at the Gold Saucer. So having a tie for the affection system is actually something that was possible in the original Final Fantasy VII. It would obviously be sort of difficult to do because, like, each character has a starting value that is different. Like, Aerith has, like, 50 affection points, and then it's Tifa at 30, Yuffie at 10, Barret at 0, right? So if you were to try to go for a tie, it's going to be kind of complicated because it's all based on, like, some of the actions you do and, like, how you give, like, answers and stuff, right? And you can gain anywhere from, like, 1 point at a time or lose 1 point at a time for particular characters, or upwards like 5 at a time, right? So the math there is kind of complicated, but it is possible to get a tie in the original FF7. If that happens, it's Aerith. It's Aerith, then Tifa, then Yuffie, then Barret. If it's like a tie, if somehow it's possible to tie all four or whatever. I assume that's going to be the same case when it comes to Rebirth. If obviously the popular debate is Tifa or Aerith, right? So if you were to get like the highest affection possible for Tifa and Aerith, I would assume the game would pick Aerith, just because that's kind of like the canon date from the original game. I know there's a choice there, whatever, and I'm team Cloud Tifa, but it is like the canon date, because it's the one that most people are probably going to get most times, right? And it's probably what's supposed to be in this game too, to a certain degree, because it is kind of Aerith's send-off game, right? I assume that's the case, but it could be something else. There could be something else that factors it in. It could still be like if you have like, tied affection for like Tifa and Aerith, maybe it's more so like, who have you done more shit with? If you've done more shit with Tifa, maybe it picks Tifa. I don't know. It could be, I don't know how they're going to do it. And some more dating scene related stuff. They say Hamaguchi says that for players' convenience, once they finish the game, they can select which character will be their date, provided that character's affection level is high enough. This will eliminate the need to play all the way from the beginning. It's obviously like a nice little quality of life like thing, I guess, where you don't have to like play all the way through the game again to build up a particular character's affection just to get them on the date scene. Like you can probably like save right before the date scene, and like as long as every character's like affection's high enough, you can just like, I'm gonna go this one, watch the date scene, reload the save, I'm gonna pick this character this time. Like that's pretty nice. It's pretty cool. I wonder what like the required minimum is to pick them for the date though. This right here is obviously very big, very important. We got to talk about this. Rebirth producer Kitase says that if you actually watch the scenes with Zack, it's not very straight up that he's alive. There's still a lot of mystery surrounding that, and exactly how Zack is involved in the story and what his presence represents. So it's obviously kind of vague, right? But it maybe seems to imply that he could be dead, which, if that's the case, we've talked about a lot here lately, the last several months. Like, I just find that to be a little underwhelming. I know that's what happens with the original Final Fantasy VII, but the implications of him being alive are just vastly more interesting to me in terms of like what can happen with the story because of that, but also the interactions with the characters, etc., etc. It's not really surprised if he's dead, right? We've said that before on the channel, and we were on that train early. We have videos on the channel talking about the ending of Remake and like the proof that Zack's dead. We're talking about like the fucking placement of stuff and the events and the weather and all kinds of shit. It would seem to prove that Zack is going to die or is dead or in between death or whatever the fuck, right? So I'm not surprised if Zack's dead. It's just the issue these days with like the Zack being alive stuff is like the devs have said in the past that he's alive, like in interviews, but also I think maybe like the Ultimania or something, or one of the Ultimanias, they've like, talked about him surviving his death moment. What could this mean for the story? What does this mean going forward? That kind of shit. And then now that we're getting close to Rebirth, they're kind of backtracking and being vague about it. And it's like, you kind of lied to us, actually. It's like, if you were vague the whole time, like, okay, there's an argument to be made that maybe he was, never alive. But it's like, y'all said he's alive in the past. Like, what the fuck? There's also another interesting bit kind of regarding Zack here from Kitase that says, Kitase says that even within the development team, there was some expectation that Remake's ending would cause controversy with much player speculation and opinions. To a certain degree, things are proceeding just as intended in this regard. However, he assures players that the Remake project is based around respecting the original story, not destroying it. Therefore, they plan to develop the story by rearranging important elements like Zack's death in a way that respects the OG but creates a sense of freshness. So obviously right there, the strip talking about Zack's death, which I think is kind of ridiculous to do in an interview. It's the same thing with them talking about like Aerith's fate all the time and more or less confirming that Aerith is at least supposed to die based on the original. Whether or not she does now, that remains to be seen. And we're going to talk about that with this video too. But they do say that they're going to rearrange elements like Zack's death to respect the original but make it like a fresh thing. So I'm trying to go down the rabbit hole with like too much like theory shit with this video, but it's like they talked about like, the ending of the Remake project still linking up with Advent Children, but like the journey like from Remake to the end of the third game could be like astronomically different, and it could just be that like by the end of the story we reset everything to like get it back to the OG timeline type shit. Like that's a possibility, right? And I would still keep it in line with like the compilation. And kind of same thing with Zack here. They talk about like freshening things up and rearranging stuff. Like Zack could maybe die at a different moment that didn't happen with the original game. Like the hill outside Midgard might not be where he dies this time, or maybe because of the Whisper bullshit, like he survives for now, right? He survives and he influences the story somehow, but ends up dying at a later point. Or the shit gets reset and he dies back at the moment he's supposed to. Like, there's all kinds of possibilities here. This isn't confirming that Zack is dead currently, right? Like, it just means that he could die at a later point. There seem to be confirming that Zack's death is going to be a thing, but it might not be right now. On to some Part 3 related shit. Rebirth producer Kitase says that although Part 3 scenario is roughly complete, it will still take a while before the game comes out. In that time, most players will discuss and analyze the story of Rebirth, which he thinks will spark many intense discussions. And we can actually kind of combo that with this one as well. It says, creative director Nomura says that they've already completed the main scenario for Part 3, so he's not worried about the story insofar as bringing it home. However, he's worried about what players will think after playing this game. This he cannot predict. And stuff like this is kind of why I talk about there being new shit when it comes to the Remake project. To what degree there's new stuff, I don't know, man. Whatever, right? But like Kitase wants people to like analyze and debate and have intense discussions and shit. But it's like if we're just doing FF7, what would that be exactly? And like with Nomura being like a little worried about like what people might think with like what happens in Rebirth, right? But if like we're just doing FF7, if Aerith just dies at the end like she's supposed to, like what worry is there? Why would he be worried? So that's why I think things could be different. Like something's going to happen at the end of the game that has Nomura a little bit worried about how fans are going to react. And there's actually another thing here in regards to Nomura surrounding like a similar topic that says Nomura says that in part 1 things didn't go quite like the original, so there was a mix of good and bad reactions to that. This time, this also seemed pivotal to the original, so he's anxious and excited to see how players will respond to the Rebirth version. So obviously that's a little bit vague, but talking about it being like a pivotal moment from the original game and like what people are going to think of like the Rebirth version, it's got to be about Aerith's fate, but it's like, again, if you're anxious or excited or worried, like something's different's going to happen. What that is exactly, I don't know. Does Aerith die? Does she live? Does she die but wake up in like Zack's world, or wake up in the live stream with Zack or whatever? Like, that's, who knows? We'll see. We're not that far off. Fuck it, whatever. We actually have another interesting like Zack-related thing here. It says, Hamaguchi says that for any details about Zack's role, he doesn't intend to share much information before launch. One thing he can mention is that once players begin playing Rebirth, and not so much time, there will be a surprise waiting for them. So this seems to corroborate what the community was talking about a little while back whenever people were first like tweeting out that they got to play Rebirth recently, and that one person like accidentally tweeted that they played like 4 hours or whatever, but that something crazy kind of happened towards the beginning. That seems to be the case here. Like Hamaguchi seems to be confirming that, and maybe that it's related to Zack as well, which is what people were thinking. I has me pretty curious of what it could be. Like I wonder if they're going to do like a Zack-related thing towards the beginning of the game in the first like handful of hours. What exactly would that be? I don't entirely know. I know people have already made videos talking about getting to play the first couple hours of the game, but I haven't watched those because I don't really want to. I don't mind like covering like articles and interviews and stuff like that, but I'm not trying to like deep dive and cover every little aspect of the game before it comes out, because I would like to go into it as fresh as I can potentially, but also making content for the game. And we'll start to wrap the video up here with some interesting Wutai details. Nomura says that moving Wutai ahead was only partly to balance out the trilogy's content. Another reason is that unlike in the OG, Wutai now has a certain level of military power to oppose Shinra, and can't be portrayed as cursorily as it first was. And kind of in a similar vein we have this. Nomura says that with Shinra making Wutai out to be such a big deal, it'd be weird to go there and find it like it was in the original game. This time, it'll be properly depicted as a nation capable of standing up against Shinra. They're going to create a whole country out of it. So that's some fantastic news, man, because Wutai is something I'm very much looking forward to. It's always been this like intriguing place because it's entirely optional in the original game. Like, and you get some good stuff there with like Yuffie's story. You meet the Turks there. You have Don Corneo there. All kinds of cool shit that you can do. But it's entirely optional. So like for them making it mandatory, I'm kind of curious what they're going to do with the story there. But then now that they want to make it more accurate to what it should be, because it's never really made sense that Wutai was like warring with the Shinra company, and you go to the location, it's a very small town, and that's kind of it. They're gonna make a whole country out of it now, and they're gonna have a really big military presence, or at least one that can oppose Shinra. I think they handled it a little bit decent with like Crisis Core, because you actually go there for like the Fort Tamblin mission, and you're fighting like Wutai soldiers with like a lot of missions you go on with Zack and stuff, so it kind of makes them feel like more of a threat, but it's never really made sense with like the original game. So the more seeing that they're going to make an entire country out of it, it's a little intriguing. I wonder how much of it we were going to be able to access and like go to. Is it going to be like Midgar, where Midgar is like fucking massive, right, in Remake, but you don't really get to access a lot of it? I wonder if they're going to do like a similar thing with Wutai potentially. I don't know. Because it's pretty much the video. I try to cover as many as I could, but it's already pushing like the 20-minute mark, which is like where I try to end like my longer videos if I can, unless it's my big ass 40-minute review of the demo, which you should definitely watch if you haven't yet. There's definitely plenty of other like pieces of interviews and translations and things out there that we can definitely talk about, maybe in a different video in a day or two or something like that. I don't know entirely. But anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. So in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.